Hello and welcome back to another episode of the On the Sideline podcast of Jackson and Kyle. I am joined here, as always, by the man who is the number 1 seed to my 16 seed. Kyle, how are you doing?
I am great. I am feeling good about this show. The Patriots are back, and hey, Miami legend Jeremy Shockey's in the chat. So thanks for coming, Jeremy.
Wow, yeah, wild. Yes, this will be a very fun show, I think. Hashtag fun show. What we're going to do is we're going to go through every single team and just say, are they winners or losers? A couple are kind of like fringe winners, losers, so we'll talk about those when we get there. But I feel like we just got to start it off with the top story right now at this hour. New England Patriots spending money left and right. Like we've never seen them before. I have the list right here of all of the transactions that have happened. We'll do this for every team. Kyle, what are your thoughts on your New England Patriots and all the things they've done?
I guess here's the thing. In a vacuum, do I love every signing? No, I do not love every signing. But as a fan of the Patriots who had to watch this team fight its way to 7-9 last season, and basically without a front seven and without a wide receiver or tight end to name, I'm optimistic about the moves. I like a lot of the moves, and I think that the Patriots right now on March 21st are better than they were last season during week 1. I think they've improved every part of the roster that they're bad at, and I think that they're winners because of that. Did they overpay some of these guys? Yeah, probably, but I think one of the things that we have to I think we have to be smarter as fans about, and as I've started to read, because this is the first year Patriots had like a ton of moves to make, and I've started to read, cap numbers are kind of BS. When they show these numbers of these guys' contracts, it almost seems like the agents are just pumping out these numbers on contract numbers to really glorify how great it is, because the guy is probably not going to make that much money. And the guarantees on it are completely skewed. The cap numbers on it are completely not true at all. And so when it says, oh, Nelson Aguilar makes $26 million, it's not really $26 million. So I like all the moves, and I think the Patriots are a better team now. I don't know how much better they are because of it, though.
Yeah, no, I kind of agree. There's a few picks that are like a few signings that I agree are kind of a little bit confusing. I think a couple that come to mind are the Nelson Aguilar one, also Matt Judon. It kind of feels like you could have gotten maybe better players for the similar money. I think we could start off with Aguilar of the I like Aguilar. I think he's a good player. I think I would have rather had a Corey Davis, but I also get what they want with Aguilar, which is they want someone who can, he's a good deep route. He's a good deep route runner. Yeah, Jesus. And I think that they want someone who can get open deep. And Will Fuller is probably a better deep guy, but he can't really, stay healthy and stay on the field. So I think that's partially probably part of their thought process there. And again, Judon, it seems like kind of a high price, but he does fit that system well. And kind of the way I look at it is, maybe Aguilar is a bit of an overpayment, but I think Kendrick Bourne is an underpayment. And I think that Matt Judon might be a bit of an overpayment, but I think Devon Godshaw is an underpayment. So if you tell me the total price tag with those 4 guys, that feels right to me, maybe even a little bit low. It just so happens that a couple of those are maybe a bit too high in a vacuum.
Yeah. And, I think the big thing, too, is that this offensive line, even with losing Thuney, I think is still going to be very, very good. They were managed to bring David Andrews and bring back Ted Karras, which I thought was huge. I think Gadshaw is going to make the defensive line better and make the run defense a lot better. And I've seen a lot of this hate towards Matthew Judon and how overrated he is in the conversations after the signing. Here's the thing. Is he as good of a pass rusher as his sack numbers probably lead to? No. But I think he's really good in run, and I think he's really underrated in coverage. So if you take him as a complete linebacker, I think he's going to be a pretty good player for the Patriots at the value they're getting. And it's not like they're paying high-end edge rusher money to get him onto the team. So I'm happy with the Judon move. The Aguilar one is questionable, but at the same time, like you said, Bourne's kind of a steal. And, our deep threat last year was Damiere Byrd.
Mm-hmm.
From Damiere Byrd to Nelson Aguilar is an upgrade. So I'm going to take it at that. I like having Aguilar on that team as an upgrade. And then they got, the same thing with the tight ends. Are the tight ends overpaid? Probably. But we got a really good all-around tight end in Jonnu Smith who can block, catch. He can even go out of the backfield and make some plays. And we got a pass-catching tight end in Hunter Henry that's 2 automatic upgrades to what we had before.
Yeah, and the tight ends thing is interesting because for me, I see the tight ends, and if a different team did this, I might be like a little bit concerned about it. But I see what the Patriots are doing, and they like to have this, multiple tight end set. It's similar to what I felt like with the Dolphins when they made some of their moves. It's like maybe in a vacuum there might not be great moves, but when you see what they're doing and how it helps their team, it makes sense. And I think that this could make this offense a lot better. The real question now, I think, is simply just they still have to get a quarterback, or do you write it out with Cam?
Well, so who is it? Jeff Howe of The Athletic, who, for my money, is the best Patriots writer in the business. By the way, anyway, he laid out this huge thing after the first day of signings that it seems like the way that the Patriots are approaching this cap space is to build around a rookie quarterback. So I don't know which rookie quarterback that is. I've heard reports today that they love Justin Fields. I know they were at Trey Lance's pro day, and I heard that they really liked him there too. So my guess is, and I still think Mac Jones really fits their system well. I've been saying that all season. So I think, one of those 3 guys they love, and I think that this team is built to basically build around one of those guys through the draft and use that rookie contract. Because if you're not getting elite quarterback play, you better get good quarterback play on a rookie contract to win a Super Bowl. Those are your 2 paths to a Super Bowl. And I think right now they're probably taking the rookie contract who's good, but not great, but you're building a great team around him.
Yeah, I could also see a Trey Lance working well here, where a quarterback who can run the ball and throw deep. I think that can make a lot of sense. Final thoughts on the Patriots?
Yeah, I mean, I just think overall they're winners. Like you said, though, it's going to be interesting to see what happens in August. If they can add, Lance, a Jones, or a Fields, that's going to be an interesting team. And how they compete for that quarterback job will be interesting to see.
Yeah, I have them as winners as well. Kind of an easy pick there for winners. We'll stay with the division. We're going to go division by division here. So that's how we're going to do this. We'll now move on to Buffalo. Kyle, or here, I'll start this off. Feel like Buffalo is one of those teams that didn't make a ton of huge moves. They lost, a couple players. I think that just with a couple of the signings they have, they lose John Brown, but they get Emmanuel Sanders, get a good backup quarterback in Mitchell Trubisky. I have Buffalo as winners here. They're not big winners, but I think they're winners.
I had them at winners too. Trubisky is an upgrade over Matt Barkley. If you need to go to a backup quarterback, the wide receivers, Sanders is a great third option, and you think Davis gets better. And this was kind of just about bringing the band back together. Is really what it was. It wasn't really doing anything crazy. It's just said, hey, we have a really good team. Let's not overreact to one bad game against the Chiefs to say that we need to change a lot to this team. Let's not overreact to that. Let's just bring back our guys and make sure we can run it back like that. So I think the Bills are winners in that regard. I think the last thing they need is they really need to address the pass rusher in the draft. If they can knock out that pick, and that's a home run pick, this is a Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, again, one of those things is a little bit easier said than done, but that would be a key factor. And, also winner Mitchell Trubisky, people aren't saying now, oh, if only the Bears drafted Deshaun Watson. So he's got that going for him.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. It's going to be him and Jake Fromm, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah. Good. Hey, Trubisky, I think that he's a top tier backup. I could see Trubisky being one of those guys that sticks around for a while.
I mean, I could too. And, I think with Allen's skill set, I think he's kind of comparable to that. He can move around a little bit, extend some plays. He obviously doesn't have the pure arm strength and arm talent that Allen has, but maybe going to Brian Dabble, which did a lot for Josh Allen, will do a lot for Trubisky too. And that can kind of fix some things for him. I'm not ruling it out. There's a reason he was picked number 2 overall, whether it was right or wrong. I think that there's a reason he was picked there, and maybe they can figure some things out with him.
Yes. Also, the great Luke Brown. Mitch has the MVP, which is the most important award you can get. A grade. Let's continue with the division now. We're going to go to the Miami Dolphins. Miami Dolphins here. I have the Miami Dolphins as losers in this one. I don't think that they're necessarily huge losers, but I do think they're losers. Losing Devon Godshaw, who we talked about, Fitzpatrick, who I think they could use a backup quarterback option with the Tua stuff. Obviously, they released Kyle Van Noy. They did get a couple good signings. I mean, Jacoby Brissett, maybe that is their number 2 option, and Will Fuller. So this felt like sort of felt like a tie to me, but I decided to go loss, but just because I wanted to say win or loss, but it's right around there.
Yeah, I kind of had them as slight losers too, because I still think there's going to be a pretty good team. But like you said, they basically replaced Godshaw with Adam Butler, and they replaced Kyle Van Noy with Bernard McKinney. And I feel like those are 2 downgrades to me in that one. He was Godshaw, as Barry Brennan mentioned, was hurt last year, but I still think he's a pretty good tackle. And I would have tried to bring him back and hope that he gets healthy this season. So I do think that they slightly downgrade, but at the same time, I still think they're going to be fine. And the Will Fuller thing was interesting. I thought that he'd be able to net a little more money on the market. Dolphins take a chance on him, and he could be a huge thing for them because they didn't really have a deep threat last season. Now, is Tua going to be able to make those throws is the big question. But if he's able to with Will Fuller, I think that's going to be an interesting variable to this offense.
Yeah, and it seems like the real way the Dolphins plan to get better this offseason is with all of their draft capital, which makes sense. The Will Fuller one, it's a total wild card. He could end up getting hurt again. If he stays healthy, though, they got a receiver that's probably like $17 million in value for a lot less because of his injury history.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's going to be interesting. I don't know. It's hard to judge that. I think the one thing I'm willing to say, though, is I think Isaiah Wilson finally jumped Andrew Thomas as the most disappointing rookie.
Yeah.
Did you see that? He
crazy
missed his physical or whatever. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so I think it was a bunch of kind of like staying afloat moves for them. You know, they got a little less expensive, but they also made some moves that I thought were slight downgrades. And this is another team like the Bills, though. If they're able to knock out the draft and make some good picks there and real impact players, it could be a huge thing for them.
Yeah, I agree. We will now finish out the AFC East. Let's go to the New York Jets. New York Jets, they franchise tag Marcus May. Didn't lose too much. They were able to get guys like Keelan Cole and Corey Davis to maybe lower numbers than you would have thought. Also, Carl Nelson, try to get that, and Sheldon Rankins. I mean, their defensive line could look really good, considering the fact they already have a good defensive interior. I have them as winners here.
I do too. I have them as winners. I thought Carl Lawson was a really good move. I thought Gerard Davis was a really nice, potential high upside pick if he bounces back from his bad season last year. Which, I'm willing to buy any stock that's low on Lions players that are moving away from Detroit. So I think that's a good high upside pick. Bringing May back, I thought, was a really good move, even with the franchise tag. And then Corey Davis should provide a lot to this team. And whoever is that quarterback, I think he's going to be a decent weapon. They still don't have a number 1 weapon in my book, but at least having him and Mims, I think, is an interesting combination of wide receivers.
Yeah, they could also, could use some offensive line help. Obviously, that was an issue last year, but they're improving their wide receiving core, which was just as big of an issue last year. So obviously, they had the number 2 overall pick. They're probably going to go quarterback there. So we'll have to see exactly how things work. But this seems like a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I agree. I think the draft is everything for this team, and what they want to do with Darnold and the quarterback situation. I think that's going to really define what this team's going to be for the next couple seasons.
Yeah, agreed. We don't spend too long on them. We'll go over to Baltimore now, changing divisions. The Baltimore Ravens. They lost some people. They lost a couple of edge rushers. Unique Ngakoue, obviously Matt Judon. Also, the Mark Ingram isn't going to hurt them too much. Did get Kevin Zeitler, who I think could help them. As a whole, this does still feel like a loss to me. But, and again, Ngakoue wasn't exactly a superstar when he played for Baltimore, and they knew it was a rental when they traded for him. This does feel like a loss for me. They lost a little bit and didn't gain as much back, but it's not a massive loss.
I had them as kind of like a neutral. I didn't love it and I didn't hate it because I feel like that they were able to kind of weather the storm and bringing back guys like McPhee and Bowser to make sure that they didn't lose too much on the defense. And I really like the Zeitler move. I think that he's going to be really nice on the interior of their offensive line, which I didn't think was really all that great last season. So I feel like doing that and bringing him back, I think could be a really nice move. I still wish they added a wide receiver, but they, if they're able to add one in the draft or maybe trade for one too, I still think this can be a really good football team. I thought they made some moves and they were smart with their picks
Yeah,
or
and the
smart
other
with their money.
right, the other sort of shoot that we're waiting for to drop though is the Orlando Brown Jr. Is he going to get traded?
Yeah.
He's requested a trade, and that could be another thing that sort of shapes this team.
Yeah, obviously that would hurt their team. Yeah, we'll see what happens with that. I think it's an interesting dilemma that he's basically wanting to get traded just so he could play left tackle.
Yeah. All right. Don't spend too long on them either. We'll go to Cleveland. The Cleveland Browns. Your Cleveland Browns. They go out and they get a couple of good defensive players, which they needed. Obviously, John Johnson, probably the big one. Also adding Troy Hill. They are winners for me. They upgraded in severe positions of need. They did lose some players, but no one that's I feel like is really a massive loss. This does feel like a winner, a significant winner for me.
Yeah, I think this is probably the biggest winner of the offseason for me so far.
Wow.
I don't understand how Johnson went for $33 million.
It's simply just I think it's just simply positional. People don't want to pay safeties.
Yeah. I mean, it probably is, but I think he's a really good player, and I thought they really capitalized on that. I think Troy Hill makes a lot of sense for them, too, just makes them a little bit better. Him and Greedy Williams will compete for the number 2 spot. They got a lot of different things they can do there. And I even think Tack is a nice number 2 edge rusher that they can use. So I liked every one of their moves. I think their offense was just about what you wanted from them. I don't know if there was anything they really were looking to upgrade. So I think addressing this defense was the number 1 priority, and I think they did everything they needed to. They added a safety, they added another cornerback, and they added an edge rusher that could help. So I thought this was all really good moves.
I totally agree. I think this is it was such an issue for them last year. The steps in the right direction for sure. This could end up as sort of a championship type team. Who knows? Speaking of teams that had championship aspirations as of last year when they were 11-0. Some interesting moves here for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They lose Bud Dupree. That's the big one. They do re-sign Juju Smith-Schuster, which is probably their biggest thing in their favor. Lost a couple of depth guys, or they gained a couple of depth guys. I do have them as losers, though. I think replacing Bud Dupree, it's going to be tough. And, the Steelers, they were 11-0 with Bud Dupree, and I think they were 1-5 without him. Obviously, that's misleading, but it's hard to replace a really good edge rusher.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I had them as kind of a neutral, and maybe like you, I have them closer to slight loss. But, I think the biggest thing was they didn't overreact to Juju Smith-Schuster. They got him a deal that I thought was pretty good value, and it's a 1-year prove-it deal. And you kind of just see what happens there because I don't think he's, top wide receiver money. And, the Bud Dupree thing is going to be interesting. I know they were undefeated with him on the field, but at the same time, I don't know if I would have paid Bud Dupree the money that he got when they have guys like TJ Watt, when they have guys like TJ Watt on their team. I'm okay with having, I would probably be okay with letting Dupree walk at the end of the day.
Yeah, and it does feel like, the Alex Highsmith, they're going to see what they can get out of him as, he was a sort of a mid-round pick last year as a rookie. He might now get the starting role. It makes sense, but it still feels like part of what made that team so good was their dominant pass rush, and they still have a great defensive line, but this is a ding to that.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's probably fair. It'll be interesting to see if Highsmith can hit another level to keep this up.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's finish off this division now with the Cincinnati Bengals. Kind of interesting what they did. I thought that they end up losing Carl Lawson. They signed Trey Hendrickson, which I'm not 100% sure on. They signed Riley Reif. They do improve the offensive line somewhat. I think Bengals fans were hoping for more of an upgrade. To me, this is a loss to me. I think that the Trey Hendrickson just feels like it's going to be one of those moves that we look back on and say, that's the bad contract and he's going to get cut after 2 years or something like that. I think Carl Lawson would have been the better option there. And some slight upgrades otherwise, but I'm putting this in the loss column.
Yeah, I had it as loss as well because I thought that you could have used more offensive line help, and I thought they would go for that more. And then, as you kind of said, doesn't Hendrickson and Hilton just kind of feel like a worse version of Carl Lawson and William Jackson? Like, why
Yeah.
wouldn't you just bring it back your guys if you're going to sign those two? I mean, I don't know what the market was like or what Lawson was feeling about coming back to Cincinnati, but I just feel like if you're going to pay those two, you might as well have just brought back Lawson and William Jackson and run it back with those guys rather than bringing in new faces that I really don't think are as good.
Yeah, Bay Area Baller says Trey Hendrickson just kept making plays last year, and it is true. I'm just a little bit concerned about someone who has a breakout season in their contract year, along with playing on that Saints defensive line. He can do well if he's in the right situation. The question, though, is they're paying him to do well in any situation. I'm not quite sure he'll live up to that.
Yeah, he's basically asked to be the guy who's going to provide consistent pass rushing, where he was probably the third guy on the Saints last year when you look at everybody on that defensive line. And it'll be interesting. I think it's not – I don't think he's going to put anywhere near the same numbers he did last year. Do you?
I would certainly bet against it. If it's over under is
Yeah.
how many sacks he had last year, I think the easy under for me.
Yeah. So – yes, I would have it as a loss right now for the Bengals. I mean, they still have ways to get better, and I think they're going to, get guys like Penei Sewell in the draft that can help them. But I still wish they addressed, I thought Corey Linsley made a lot of sense for them, and it did. I don't know if they were in on that trying to get him or not, but I thought they really could have addressed a lot of offensive line rather than just Riley Reeve.
Yeah, I do agree. That it feels a bit of a Band-Aid, but you know what? Still, a Band-Aid is better than leaving your open wound out. So there you go. Let's go on to the AFC West now. As the official Las Vegas Raiders podcast, we should start there. So they, lose a few guys that I don't think they desperately needed necessarily in terms of the free agency. The real thing is, losing Gabe Jackson, losing Rodney Hudson. That's the big one. Obviously losing Trent Brown. And, they pick up some pieces. They pick up John Brown. They pick up Kenyon Drake. And I love the Unique Ngakoue signing for them. He really fits that 4-3 defensive end very well. But I went back and forth on this. I'm going to give it a loss just because I don't like what they lost with their offensive line, especially the Rodney Hudson thing. That's tough. And as much as I like the Unique Ngakoue move, I feel like they got worse, not better.
Yeah, I think I have it as a loss too. I think that Ngakoue, like you said, is I think fantastic value for what they got him for. I think pairing him with Max Crosby is going to be fun. And I kind of get the idea of, look, we have an elite offensive line, but holes across the rest of the roster. So let's give up some of the offensive line to improve other places. But then I looked at some of the moves to counter it, and it's like it's 1-year flyers on guys like Solomon Thomas. And, I don't think Solomon Thomas really showed anything for me. And then, John Brown, I think makes sense, but they already kind of had a deep threat receiver that they just drafted in Ruggs. And then they signed Kenyon Drake when they already have Josh Jacobs, who I think is really good. And now Jacobs and Drake are both behind worse offensive lines. So I understood the idea about letting some of the offensive line go to improve elsewhere, but I just don't think they really improved elsewhere for me or improved enough. Outside of getting Ngakoue and Crosby, which will be fun for an edge rushing combo, I didn't think they improved enough in other positions.
Yeah, I mean, I like the Kenyon Drake signing. I mean, you need two backs. It's not like you can just go one back the entire season. So I think getting a good, we've seen teams with good 1-2 punches. That makes a significant difference. And they are different enough backs that I think it works. And I also think that, getting Ngakoue, like that's a huge thing. It's hard to get a good pass rusher. So while it is just sort of one thing, it is a big thing. But yeah, like you said, it's just they lost too much on the offensive line.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think the team needs to still make, I still am expecting and hoping for, 2 or 3 more moves from this team because I think that they still have pieces they need to upgrade at.
Yeah. Also, the chat was correcting me on a misspelling or a couple of typos on one of my video titles. So it's fixed now to everyone who was thinking about that. Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to the next team. Why don't we? Let's go to the Denver Broncos. Will this year be the year that they finally live up to my own personal hype. I keep overrating them. Just getting Ronald Darby, I like that signing, and then they go out and get Kyle Fuller. So it seems like the cornerback position looks pretty good now, where that was something that we really were thinking about them needing. And, the franchise tag on Justin Simmons, and they keep Von Miller, where we thought that he was going to walk. So to me, this does feel like a winners here.
Yeah, they got the contract down for Simmons, and maybe Darby is a slight overpay, but then I also feel like they're getting really good value for Fuller. So I think that's a really good corner combination that I like. And like you said, getting guys like Harris back. Yeah, I really like this team. So I'm giving this a win for the Broncos. I still think they need to address the quarterback position. I don't know what their plans are there, but I think it's a win.
Yeah, this just feels to me like they're going to draft quarterback. The mock drafts keep saying like, oh no, they're going to improve their defense. Like, no, I think they're going to go with their 9th pick. They can get a good quarterback here, whether it's Mac Jones or Trey Lance or whoever. And I think that's probably what they'll do.
Yeah, just find the tallest guy. That's who the Broncos will look at.
Yeah, there you go. Look at height to figure that one out. All right, we'll move on to the Kansas City Chiefs, the reigning AFC champions. They lose both of their starting tackles from last season. They do gain, obviously, the big one was Joe Thuney. But to me, I think that as much as I like Joe Thuney, they lost. They got one really good offensive lineman, but they lost 2 starting tackles, which I think is really important for this offense, especially. So I'm going to go with a loss here.
That's fair. I get it. I'm curious what they do, because you are assuming that Duvernay Tardif comes back, and then you have guys. So the way I saw this was they are either envisioning on. I'm curious if Thuney bumps to the outside. He played left tackle in college. He's done it before for New England when necessary. I'm curious if he becomes a tackle for New England. Getting him at a $4.5 million cap hit for this season, I think is insane. That's kind of why I chalked it up as a slight win. But you could also talk me into a loss, because it just makes sense getting a guy like, they're basically getting Kyle Long for free. They're getting Duvernay Tardif back. And if Thuney bumps to the outside and plays tackle, I think this is once again a pretty good offensive line still.
Sure, but it still is a lot of ifs, and there still is these question marks. And I'd rather have, obviously, sometimes you have to take chances, but it's better when you don't have to. Granted, if they kept their tackles, there's still the chance of those guys getting, injured or not being fully healthy for the season. But either way, I don't know. I mean, we saw how bad it affected Mahomes in the Super Bowl without those tackles, and it seems like it's going to really depend on how they replace it. I don't think it's a huge loss, but I do think that they're going to have to draft. They're going to probably have to draft an offensive lineman and nail that pick.
Yeah, I think so. They can't draft Isaiah Wilson.
Exactly.
I mean, but if they manage to hit on that pick, then I think this is, this team's still going to be really competitive. If they hit on that pick, I think this is a win of an offseason. I think the last thing they need to do is readdress their number 2 receiver spot. If they're able to address that too, I think this can be a really good team all over again.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe that's a 2nd round pick option. We'll see. And now we'll finish off the AFC West with the Chargers. They ended up getting Corey Linsley, who was one of the big ticket free agents, the center from Green Bay. Also a Jared Cook signing, which, he's don't try to. He's got to make sure he keeps both hands on the football, but a good pickup. Obviously, losing Hunter Henry is going to hurt. They lose their backup quarterback in Tyrod Taylor, but this is. I do have the Chargers as a win here, just because I think addressing that offensive line is so important after the mistake that was, the abomination that was last year with their line.
I agree. I have it as a win as well. They got better on the offensive line. I think letting Henry go at that price and bringing back Cook at significantly less price, I think makes a lot of sense. So I have this as a win. I think that they made smart moves, and I think they were opportunistic with getting a guy like Linsley, who instantly helps that offensive line, and protecting Justin Herbert's the most important thing for this team. So they're able to do that, and I thought they won.
I'm looking forward to next year maybe 5 years in the future when the Chargers offensive line is just fully made up of former Packers offensive linemen.
And then they have the best offensive line in football.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, if you can't beat them, just sign all their guys.
There you go.
Yeah. All right. So that's it for the AFC West. We'll move on to the Tennessee Titans, the team that drafted Isaiah Wilson, who's somehow now come up 3 times in this podcast already. They lose Corey Davis, Desmond King, Jonnu Smith. They also released a handful of basically, like half their secondary there. They did get Bud Dupree, who I'm a fan of. I think he's very good, and it's a position of need, and that's really the key thing there. So getting that position of need settled, that's huge, and it completely completely changes their team. And I went back and forth on this. I'm going to give it a win simply because I like the Bud Dupree signing, and I think it's something they needed so much. I think their secondary looked way worse last year because they didn't have a pass rusher. Vic Beasley and Clowney combined for no sacks. They tried to address it, didn't work. There still is a chance with the injury. Dupree's getting up there, but when healthy, he is one of those guys who can consistently beat a tackle. So I have it as a win.
Yeah, I think so too. I question some of the moves because I didn't love them getting rid of Adoree Jackson. I thought this offense was fantastic last year, and I think it's worse now. Losing guys like Davis and losing some guys on the offensive side of that ball. But yeah, I mean, I keep going back and forth with this. I think history with Tennessee, because this is like the 3rd or 4th offseason in a row, I feel like, where they've added this big name pass rusher to try and fix things. In the last few years, it hasn't really worked.
Yeah.
And I could see the scenario where Dupree's out of Pittsburgh and out of that elite defensive line and all of a sudden doesn't look as dominant as Bud Dupree was. So I could see that scenario, but I think Dupree is good. And I believe in Bud Dupree that I am going to give it a slight victory for the Titans to be able to address that position. And I still think it's going to be a good offense. I just don't think it will be as good as last season.
Yeah, all right. I sort of thought this was going to be a hot take. I thought you were going to go loss here. And losing Arthur Smith obviously hurts as well. But I just feel like the things they lost are a lot easier to replace than what they gained in a guy like Dupree.
I think that's fair. Yeah, I mean, they can obviously add another possession receiver to make up for guys like, losing Davis. I think the Janoris Jenkins signing also kind of made sense, taking a flyer on him. I just would have liked him next to Adoree Jackson as the number 2 guy, rather than it seems like he's kind of coming in stuck as the number 1 guy right now.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. Let's move on to another team, the Jaguars, who were in kind of a similar spot as the Jets. These two teams were kind of, almost compared to each other a lot, with a lot of cap space and a top 2 pick. They make some moves. They go out and they make a lot, sort of these smaller moves. Not a ton of big name guys. The only guy they give more, double-digit millions to is Shaquille Griffin. And they obviously tagged Cam Robinson. Don't lose a ton here for the Jaguars. I have them as a win as well. It's not a massive win. Again, they had a lot of cap space. They didn't overspend, which is not in Jaguars fashion. Maybe they've learned their lesson. You can't buy a championship in free agency, although they came close in 2017. I do think that this is a slight win here, makes their team a little bit better for the future.
I agree. I have it as a win too. I thought they got better at a lot of positions. I think Griffin, I don't know about the ceiling of Griffin, but I think he makes a lot of sense there, especially for a young guy, taking a chance on him and paying some, he's like you said, he's the only guy they really paid any money to. And I just think that they got better across the board. Guys like Jones are going to be a nice 2nd or 3rd receiver for them. Malcolm Brown's not a bad trade option. Getting a guy like Carlos Hyde as that kind of 2nd running back next to Robinson, I think makes sense. I just think it was a bunch of smart, opportunistic moves for them and not going crazy, like you said, and overpaying everybody.
Yeah, exactly. I don't have a ton else to add on there. Want to just go ahead to the next team?
Yeah, we can keep going.
All right, we'll go to the Indianapolis Colts. They have a very this was very easy to get their moves on this graphic. Not a ton of moves that they made. Didn't really do much of anything. They kind of re-signed a couple of the guys that they already had, Marlon Mack and Xavier Rhodes, and obviously they traded for Wentz earlier. I do have this as a loss, though, because I don't like when teams, I was very high on the Colts thinking, hey, all this cap space, they can get some of this receiver help. The receiving core not looking so great right now. And I think that's something they should have addressed when they're basically, all those good receivers are gone now. So to me, this is a missed opportunity. And especially with some of these receivers wanting these 1-year deals to sort of prove it and go in the next year when there'll be more cap space, I think that this is a missed opportunity for Indianapolis.
I agree because I thought that they should have added a lot of. I think that they should have been in play for a lot of these wide receivers and just weren't. Like you said, I don't understand why they weren't at least calling Will Fuller. I think there was a few of these guys that they could have looked at and they didn't. So while I don't want teams to go nuts in free agency, I thought that they had moves to make that could have improved this team and made it from a, you know, competitive division winning team to a potential Super Bowl team, and they didn't really make them. And maybe they bring T.Y. Hilton back and add another receiver, but I thought they really could have, improved this team and in their couple of holes.
Yeah, it almost makes me wonder a little bit if this is more of a let's pump the brakes. Let's not get too excited this season. Let's, see what we have and once before we sort of go all in a little bit and maybe to save the cap room. But also the coach, they just don't like to spend. They just don't. This is what they do. They don't spend in free agency. And I thought this year would be an exception given the roster they have. But they said, nope, we're still going to do what we do.
Yeah, so I guess the scenario could be like if Wentz bounces back a little this season and puts together a good year, and this team goes like 13-4 next year, then I could see them really kind of going all in for it, right?
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
They're the Colts. This is the thing.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I could see it happening, but like you said, who knows with this team sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I really feel like my take was like, oh, the Colts have all this cap space. Look at what they're going to do. And then when they didn't spend, I'm like, of course they didn't spend. What was I thinking?
Yeah. What can you do?
All right. Finally, last AFC team, and I do mean last, the Houston Texans here. They have a big list. I don't know if anyone signed more teams than the or more players than the Houston Texans, although not a lot of big names to say the least. It took a lot of flyers on guys, it seems, getting a lot of sort of these smaller moves. I think maybe the biggest would be to Tyrod Taylor, which kind of looms a little bit large right now, given all the Deshaun Watson stuff. We don't have to get too into that, but they're a loss just because of all the stuff that comes off with Deshaun Watson, in my opinion. I think that just makes them a loss. I'm not sure if we should count that or not, but, if we wouldn't, I'd probably give it a win, but with that, I'm giving it a loss.
I'd still probably lean loss. It seemed kind of like spending money just to spend it, or just, I don't even know if it's really spending money because they're not paying a ton of money to anybody. Right. But it's just kind of like, hey, we'll take you on. I mean, it just didn't make sense. This team is Phillip Lindsay and Mark Ingram. Like, how many running backs does this team need? Ryan Finley and Tyrod Taylor, which kind of leads me to believe that this team isn't really thinking Watson's going to be on the team. So, yeah, I mean, I kind of have it as a loss just because I don't really know what the plan is with all these signings. It just kind of said, let's go quantity over quality, it seems like to me.
Yeah, well, I can pull it back. To me, I don't hate it, though, because I feel like this feels like, okay, we're rebuilding this year, so let's just get guys who, could do well. Christian Kirksey, Desmond King, get some guys that sort of have the, Phillip Lindsay, guys that have potential. Marcus Cannon's another one where they traded for him. Shaq Lawson. Get these guys and just sort of have them play, try them out, and if they're good, then you keep them, and if they suck, well, then who cares? Because you're not going to be good this year anyways.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with them. My thing is, I just don't think they got better from this. That's why I had it as a loss.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're certainly not going to be like competitive. That's fair. I get what they're doing a little bit, but yeah, and again, with Watson, it makes it like a biggest loss of the offseason.
Yeah. I mean, that's always going to loom over everything they do.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So that's it for the AFC. Let's move on to the NFC. I have to go to the bathroom, but I'm going to let you go ahead and give your thoughts on the Seattle Seahawks.
Seattle Seahawks. So the Seattle Seahawks brought back Chris Carson, signed Gerald Everett to a cheap deal, which I thought was a good one, and then brought in Gabe Jackson, which is a nice move for Russell Wilson and bringing in a decent offensive lineman. I had it as a slight win. I thought they could have made a couple more moves, but overall, I thought they just made some opportunistic things for themselves, got a little bit better with guys like Jackson and getting guys like Carson back. And I just thought it was a good move overall to bring in those guys. And Everett, I think, is a good flyer. And I guess the one move you could have said is, they didn't bring back Shaquille Griffin. But, I'm not sure if they wanted to pay Shaquille Griffin that kind of money. And this team always just seems to get by with cornerbacks. While the secondary wasn't very good, I think it's going to bounce back with those safeties this next season, regardless of who's at corner. So I have it as a win for the Seahawks.
Yes, I also like the comment. It's the Kyle podcast now. That's right, Kyle podcast. I had them as a loss. I feel like I do agree the Chris Carson thing is that's huge, keeping him there. But I feel like they lost a decent amount. I don't think they gained too much here. So again, it's a slight loss because it doesn't feel like anything was huge. But I still would have liked to see them sort of address the pass rush situation. Chris Dunlap is now gone. This seems like I gave him a loss. Not a huge loss, but a little bit of a loss.
Yeah, and that will be the interesting thing because we saw what this defense looked like without a guy like Carlos Dunlap. So maybe they're able to add somebody and improve that, but I still think that they got slightly better at positions that they weren't very good at, and I'm willing to give that a win because of it.
Yeah, fair enough. And they still have Russell Wilson, so that's a pretty big win just there.
Yeah, they didn't trade him, so that's the biggest win.
Right. Let's go to Arizona. The Arizona Cardinals, I have them as a win here, largely because getting Rodney Hudson for basically free. I don't know what it is about the Cardinals getting star players for very little amount. Get him for a third. Obviously, they had the Hopkins thing last year. Also, Matt Prater, which I think is key. They lost some games due to the kicking position. Getting that squared away is huge. Getting J.J. Watt. They do lose a little with the Kenyon Drake, Patrick Peterson, Hassan Reddick, but I think they gained more than they lost here. And I also like the re-signing of Robert Alford so they can get him for less money. I think that made sense. And Kelvin Beachum, he's played well for them. Hasn't played well the rest of his career, but played well for them. So I have them as a win.
I had them as a bigger winner too. I thought they did a really good job this offseason. I think letting Peterson go made sense. I think letting some of their other guys go made sense. The Reddick thing. I'm surprised Reddick went for the money that he did after his season, but I think teams are just getting smarter. But they brought in J.J. Watt, so it wasn't necessarily a dire need for them to bring him back. And I think A.J. Green's a nice flyer. As a number 3 receiver who kind of battled with a lot of injuries, I think A.J. Green's a really nice flyer for them. So I think that's a win.
Yeah, the Cardinals and having a veteran wide receiver who's an all-timer, name a more iconic duo.
Yeah, that's true. Fitzgerald's gone this year, right?
He still hasn't signed a contract, but probably.
Yeah. So, I just think, I think AJ Green still has something in the tank.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I guess we'll see. I don't know if I want to say for certain, but again, just getting the star players, J.J. Watt and Rodney Hudson. I think Rodney Hudson will help them a lot when their interior offensive line was an issue last year.
Yeah. Yeah, and they can still probably add a couple more guys on the interior of the offensive line, but Hudson's the big piece.
Yeah, I agree. We'll go to the Rams now, the Los Angeles Rams. They didn't do a ton here. They lose Michael Brockers, lose Malcolm Brown, Gerald Everett, Troy Hill, John Johnson. So they lose a good chunk. They did re-sign Leonard Floyd. They also traded for Matt Stafford, and I wasn't entirely sure if we should count that, just given the fact that it was, earlier, but I'm still going to include it. So for me, it's a win just because I think upgrading the quarterback position means so much that even though they lost a ton elsewhere, I think getting an upgrade at quarterback, that's going to make it a win for me.
I had it as a win too because of that. I thought that the defense probably downgraded a little bit, and there wasn't really a lot of moves for the Rams to make given their cap space situation. But I thought they did fine, and obviously, like you said, Stafford's the big piece. And if this team makes a Super Bowl, it's because they got better at quarterback. So I have it as a win.
Yeah, exactly. And it feels like they feel closer to a Super Bowl now than they did last year. So to me, that's simple. It's a win. All right, we don't have to spend forever on them because, again, they didn't do a ton. We've already talked about the Matt Stafford stuff to death at this point. San Francisco 49ers, they lose a couple of pieces here. They also are able to re-sign a couple big ones. Kyle Juszczyk, that broke on our show, and obviously the huge one, Trent Williams, giving him $1 billion, but keeping a star left tackle. That could end up being one of the contracts that comes back to bite them in the future. But as of right now, I think it's a move that they really needed to make. So I'm going to give it a win here.
Yeah, I do think it's a move that they needed to make because he is an elite left tackle, and they really needed him. So if they keep Jimmy Garoppolo healthy, that'll be a big thing. And I like the Alex Mack signing for cheap. Mm-hmm. You're not paying a ton of money to him, and he's not the same guy he was, but I still think he can be productive. So I think that makes sense. I feel like, I guess the last thing, I feel like Richard Sherman just coming back at this point makes sense, right?
Mate, why do you feel that way?
I just feel like that they're going to need a cornerback if they don't replace him. I feel like they're going to need a cornerback, and I don't know who they're going to, I don't really know who else is out there to play that kind of role for them.
I still feel like he's going to be a Raider. I still feel like the Raiders have the cap space to do it. He would fit their scheme. I think he seems like a Gruden grinder. I feel like the Raiders are the favorites still.
I still feel like they're the favorites. I think it makes sense for San Francisco to at least make the call at this point because, like I said, if they don't bring him back, I feel like that's just going to be a position they're going to have to address.
Yeah, sure. That's fair. Maybe you could do that in the draft. We'll see. All right. So let's move on now to the NFC South. We're going to start off with the Atlanta Falcons. They lost Alex Mack. That Kyle Shanahan loves to get his former players. Not a ton here. This is one of the teams that really wasn't going crazy here. I have them as like a slight loss just because, losing Canu Neal, Alex Mack. But as a whole, this is kind of one of those it's a very small deal.
Yeah, I had it as a slight loss just because this team didn't have a lot of moves to make either because of their cap situation.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how they could have really improved the team given that. They're going to have to in the draft. That's the big thing. They're going to have to win the draft to have a good offseason. So I have it as a loss for now. I guess the one thing was the Matt Ryan restructure is interesting, right? Because it's going to be hard to get rid of him before 2023. So I guess if you're looking at that fourth pick, it's going to be kind of hard to look at a quarterback this season, right?
Yeah, everyone keeps mocking like the Justin Fields to Atlanta. That's like the constant like mock thing. I don't know if they go that route. I don't know if they just say, okay, let's move on from Matt Ryan. I think it might make a lot more sense to keep Matt Ryan and just try to be competitive in the future. I think that we could see. I feel like they are a team that was better than their record. They just, in Atlanta fashion, keep blowing these fourth quarter leads. And I think if they could find a way to just sort of close that out and use that number 4 pick on something that can help you do that, I think they'd be better.
Yeah. We're a pro Matt Ryan podcast here, so I agree with you. It's just it's going to be interesting because that was a long rumor. I don't know if it's a fan thing. Like I said, I know a lot of Atlanta fans who, for whatever reason, are kind of over Matt Ryan, but it'll be interesting to see what they do in terms of addressing that position in that 4th pick. I just feel like I think them and the Dolphins are in the same boat. If you're not taking a quarterback, trade back. Both of those teams should trade back. There's 5 quarterbacks there. There's a ton of teams looking at them. I think both of those teams can capitalize and net a ton of picks by trading back. So I'm curious to see what Atlanta does going forward.
Yeah, I agree. In a perfect world, you have to get the right suitor also to make that work. But I think I agree with that. We'll go now to the Carolina Panthers. They probably the biggest thing was to get Hassan Reddick for 1 year, $6 million. That seems like a steal to me, and they franchise tag Taylor Motton. So they do lose Curtis Samuel. So again, not a team that had like a ton of crazy moves going on, but they make some small ones here. And I'm going to give them a win. Largely the Reddick signing just seems like a great buy low kind of move.
Yeah, it's a 1 year prove it deal, which I always like 1 year prove it deals. Bringing back Taylor Motton on the franchise tag makes a lot of sense. And I'm going to screw up David Moore and DJ Moore probably 100 times next season, but I'm here for it. So I give them as a win. I like a lot of what they've done over the past couple seasons. I think they're going to be a pretty good football team this next year. And I'm curious. I think Reddick is a clear upgrade to what they had without paying a ton of money. So I think that's a win.
Yeah, I agree. We'll move on to the New Orleans Saints now. New Orleans Saints, they're one of the more intriguing teams heading into this offseason, given their wild cap situation. They lose guys like Quan Alexander, who we knew would be gone, Jared Cook, Josh Hill, Janoris Jenkins, Thomas Morstead, Emmanuel Sanders. So they do lose pieces. They're also able to re-sign some of these guys. They tagged Marcus Williams. They also, lost Trey Hendrickson and Sheldon Rankins. They are, to me, a clear loss here. Yes, they didn't lose maybe these superstar players that we thought that there was a chance they could, but they lost enough here and obviously didn't gain any, maybe not as big of a loss as we thought they were going to be heading into this offseason, but they're still losers here.
Yeah, I think I would have it as a win given their circumstances, but a
Mm-hmm.
loss given that because of how just in a vacuum they lost because of how many players they lost and
Right.
how much I think this team's going to be worse. But I thought they did pretty well given their circumstances and fighting out of that cap hell to get to this point and being able to keep guys like Marcus Williams. I thought is a good play. So I think going forward it'll be interesting to see what they do. But I thought given their situations they did pretty well. But yeah, I think there wasn't a lot of scenarios where the Saints were winning this offseason, right?
Yeah, and I guess that's the fair thing. It's kind of hard to decide exactly winners or losers, just given the expectations going in, and also But you're right. If I was just grading them on like exceeding or doing worse than expectations, they would probably be a win. Even that, I don't think it's like a huge win. But I decided to go to loss just given the sheer amount of talent they lost.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is a completely different football team still. I know Saints fans are arguing they're going to be just fine because they restructured a bunch. But
Mm-hmm.
listen, this team's worse than it was last season. There's no debate on that. This team is worse than it was last season. Now, do I think that they should have paid $60 million to Trey Hendrickson? Probably not.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think it's a worse team than last year. So that doesn't change things.
Right. And you have obviously the key thing is the quarterback position is up in the air now. Saints fans are convinced Jameis Winston is going to be fantastic. Drew Brees was good at the beginning of last season. It wasn't until after the injury that things fell off the rails. And maybe it'll be Taysom Hill. We still don't know. Everyone's convinced it's going to be Winston. I am not convinced. I think there still is a chance Hill could be the starter. But either way, there's a huge question mark in the most popular and most important position in football.
Yeah, I agree. I think it'll be. I think it's a huge question mark, and we're not going to find out till week 1 of the season because the Saints aren't going to reveal anything. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. Maybe they try and find a way to move up and get a guy, but I don't know. I wouldn't trust Jameis Winston for a full season, but I don't know if I'd trust Taysom Hill either.
Right. It's a tough situation, but again, it could be worse as well. Let's talk about the reigning champs, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Really, this was just them keeping the guys that they wanted to keep. They keep Shaq Barrett, Levante David, Rob Gronkowski, Ryan Suckup, and even some key depth guys like Nakeem Nunez-Roches, Aaron Stinney, and Kevin Minter, who all have had decent roles. Stinney started a playoff game. So obviously tagging Godwin is huge, extending Tom Brady helped make all this possible, and only losing Andrew Adams and Joe Haeg, who, losing our sixth offensive lineman hurts a little, but it's not a big deal. So to me, this is a win just because of who they were able to keep. They're basically the same team, and they won a Super Bowl last year, so that's a win.
Yeah, similar to the Bills, it's bringing the band back together. They were able to manage to do this, so I think it's a big win. Getting all those guys back, and they're going to be a really good team again next year. So with the full off season too, rather than starting slow like they did, there's going to be a really good football team, I think. So it's a win.
Yeah. All right. Halfway through the NFC now, going on to the NFC North, Chicago Bears. I don't think we really have to. I don't think we're going to have any heated debates over this one. This is a loss. They had hopes for Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson. Settle on Andy Dalton. Also, getting Desmond Trufant, who didn't look great for Detroit, but as you mentioned earlier, maybe that's a good. I actually don't hate that move, to be honest, but didn't lose a ton. Franchise tag Robinson. And I think the real thing is losing Kyle Fuller. That's something that does absolutely hurt. So it's a loss. I don't think it's a huge loss. I think it might be getting a bit overblown because like everyone's freaking out about the Andy Dalton thing, but he kind of was their best option available. They just didn't have much available, but it's still a loss here.
Yeah, I think it is too. I mean, like you said, I think that we were expecting a lot more quarterback moving than what we got this offseason.
Mm-hmm.
I thought there was potential for it, but it ended up not happening. That being said, like, would you have rather had Andy Dalton compared to like Jacoby Brissett and taking a chance on that? I mean, or just bringing back Trubisky at that point. I don't really know. It's so hard to tell. All these guys who are kind of mid-tier, I have really no opinion about. But I do think the Fuller thing was weird. I thought letting him go was a tough thing to swallow, and I think that's a big problem for them. So I do have it as a loss.
Yeah, and the weird thing about Dalton too is just that he's not a bad quarterback, but it's just kind of like you know what he is. Dalton isn't going to all of a sudden become an MVP quarterback. He's not all of a sudden going to figure this out and put it all together in year like 12 of his career or whatever it is. Like if you get a Sam Darnold, at least there's like the hope that maybe he becomes this superstar. Probably won't happen, but there's at least like a small chance.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's the thing. So maybe they could have gone for someone with a little more upside. Obviously, they chose not to. So it'll be interesting. But yeah, I do have as a loss. I think this team is worse now than it was last season. So that's the only reason I have it as a loss. And I don't really know how it gets better. And I don't know, like if I'm Allen Robinson, I'm refusing to sign any contract extension. Right? I'm not staying with this team any longer.
Yeah, this seems like this is going to be his last year. But hey, for the Bears, could be worse. At least you didn't pay Mike Glennon $15 million a year this year.
Yeah, that's true. You didn't pay him. So, yeah, I mean, tough situation for the Bears.
Yes, agreed. We will move on now to Detroit Lions. Detroit Lions, they lose Matt Stafford, so they're going to be a loss right there. But, not a horrible offseason outside of this. Obviously, really lost a ton of guys. I mean, laundry list of notable players leaving this team. It seems like a rebuild, though, so it's a loss, but it almost seems like an intentional loss. I wouldn't be shocked to see this team sort of, be okay with not necessarily having the best season this year, so to speak. Spoken like a lawyer there. Get Jared Goff back, stopgap quarterback. I think he's better than just a stopgap, but still a loss, just given, again, how much worse they're going to be in 2021.
Yeah, that's fair. This is a clear rebuild. Some of their signings felt like it's kind of like what we said with the who was that earlier where we talked? Oh, the Texans, where it's kind of like, hey, let's just sign in some of these guys and see what they can do. Maybe they pan out, maybe they don't. But I still think overall it's probably a loss just because, like you said, they're going to be worse. Even if the fans, like the fans in the chat here, are a little more excited for the new coach and new era for the Lions, I still have it overall as a loss just because they're worse without Stafford.
Yeah, this just feels like a rebuild, which is fine. Sometimes you have to rebuild. That's okay. But that's what it seems like it's going to be this year.
Yeah. So, maybe we judge this offseason a little better 3 years from now when they're, have a better team around them.
Yeah, sure. Let's go to the Green Bay Packers now. Again, we don't spend forever on the Detroit Lions. Green Bay Packers, not a ton of craziness here. They didn't have a ton of cap space, so people kept saying they should sign J.J. Watt. They don't have that money. But they do get the Aaron Jones. That's the one thing they get back. But losing Corey Linsley, that's just tough. Losing your favorite quarterback, Tim Boyle, along with Jamal Williams, Christian Kirksey, who when healthy is good, but he's never healthy kind of guy. So this is a loss for me. It could be a worse loss, but it's still a loss.
Yeah, when you lose Tim Boyle, that's an automatic loss for your offseason.
Yes.
Linsley's the big thing here. Not being able to bring him back, obviously that's a tough situation. And it's the same sort of thing I said with the Saints. I think this team's worse than it was last season. They still have room to improve, but I still feel like this team is worse. They weren't in the market for any of the wide receivers, especially when some of those wide receivers went for cheaper than we thought they would. I thought they would maybe try and get one of those guys or two of those guys. They weren't able to do that. They got worse at the offensive line, like you said, and, it'll be interesting to see what they do going forward.
Yeah, but hey, who knows? Maybe their third-string quarterback they draft in the first round, he could help turn them around.
Yeah.
The
Tim Boyle replacement will determine the entire season.
Yes, exactly. All right, let's round out now the division with the Minnesota Vikings. And I have every team in this division with a loss here. The Minnesota Vikings losing Anthony Harris, losing Afedi and Dagabo, I think are two really underrated players. Also, Kyle Rudolph, Riley Reif. So, Dan Bailey's not going to kill him. But, they get Patrick Peterson, which is kind of an interesting signing. I do like the Dalvin Tomlinson. So, it's not a massive loss, but this does feel like, it feels like a step backward, especially losing, Anthony Harris going for that little money. It seemed like that was a shock to me. And I think that, losing, at least 4 starters, at least, that's going to be a little bit tough to come back from.
Yeah, the Harris thing was interesting. So they couldn't put together that offer for him. That seemed like a weird thing that they weren't able to bring him back at that price. I really like Dalvin Tomlinson. He was one of the guys I really wanted the Patriots to get. I think he was close to the top of my list. But I think they got good value in Gottschall that they didn't have to worry about Tomlinson, so it was okay. But I think he's a really good defensive tackle. I think he's going to have a huge impact for this defense. But yeah, I still kind of have it as a loss just because of the overall loss of Harris, and I don't think this team really did a whole lot to improve.
Exactly. And that's kind of just the weird thing. They're just kind of in that weird spot right now of not really good enough to be competitive, but not bad enough to get a good draft pick.
Yeah, the Peterson flyer is going to be interesting because he looked on my wash scale. He looked like about a 5.5 last season. I don't know how much is left in the tank for Patrick Peterson, or if he even makes his defense any better. So but if they get good value out of him and he kind of has a resurgent year, maybe that pans out and this team's a playoff team all of a sudden because they were close last year.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it kind of feels like maybe Peterson could be like a safety. Like it seems like the transition would just make sense. He doesn't quite have the speed he once did, but he still has great ball skills, great vision, and is a really smart player. So putting him in as a safety role, we've seen corners make that transition before, and I feel like it would make perfect sense for him to do it. I don't know if that's what they're going to do, but it would make sense.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of different directions they can go in, but if they move him to safety, but then they're back in square one where they need 3 cornerbacks instead of just 2.
Yeah, that's the issue. Is everyone keeps kind of saying like, well, Peterson was kind of rough because he had to be the number 1 corner in Arizona. I don't see him not having. Who are they going to have as
He's the number 1 corner here? Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, at least on paper, I think he is. So it's just they still need to improve that position, I think. So all right, let's move on. Final division, best division in football. We'll start off with the balls. Washington to me are winners here. Losing Ronald Darby does hurt. But they keep Brandon Sheriff on the franchise tag. They go out and get Curtis Samuel, which I think that's a good fit. Ryan Fitzpatrick, which I love. I hope Fitzpatrick gets to start a full season. Please let that happen. William Jackson, also another good guy. Getting 3 starters and an upgrade at the quarterback position, that's going to be a win for me. Yes.
Fitzmagic is in the building, baby. I'm all about it. So I have it as a win too. Sheriff is a nice pick. Fitzpatrick, I think, is a great player to bring in. And I mean, I think they draft a quarterback still anyway, but I think if they manage to move up and get Mac Jones, I think that they make a lot of sense to have him groom, or if they get a later quarterback, maybe he grooms that guy. And look, I like the Samuel and Jackson signings. I think it'll make a lot of sense for this team. This team is better than what it was last season and it made the postseason. So I'm all in on the Washington football team with a win this offseason.
Yeah, and granted, it wouldn't be that outrageous if they won 2 more games than they did last year and missed the playoffs. Yeah, even though they made the playoffs last year.
Yeah, that's true. So, yeah, I mean, I still have it as a win, though. I thought they just did a really good job in signing guys.
Yeah, I agree. And they got a lot better as the season went on. So, again, losing Darby could hurt, but they got William Jackson, who's probably the better player. So, it just seems like as a whole, this is a team that's set up well for next season, and especially in this division. We'll go to the Philadelphia Eagles now. Eagles were in a tough spot, but I thought that they kind of did an all right job here. I think that really the Anthony Harris is kind of the only thing they gained too much of. But listen, that's a good 1-year flyer. I have them as a win. It's not a massive win. I don't think this team is going to be a Super Bowl team, but I do have them as a win here.
Yeah, they got better in the secondary, which they weren't good at last season. Like you said, I don't think there's going to be a good team next season, but I think that they can be pretty good going forward. I think this is the right move. It's a step in the right direction, and those safeties are going to help. So I have it as a win.
Yeah, I think the Eagles' defense underrated.
It could be. It depends on what they do going forward. I still think that maybe if this team isn't going to be as good on the offensive side, they could probably trade one of their pass rushers if they really needed to. So I'll be interested to see what they do with the next few moves because they don't have a lot of cap flexibility. Maybe they move some of those guys to try and get better overall, but we'll see.
Yeah, this still feels like a rebuilding year, but so that's kind of why it was weird that Anthony Harris went there. Like I would have thought that there'd be way other teams that were, especially again the contract they got, taking basically no money to play for a team that probably won't be competitive. Very bizarre.
I didn't understand what the market was. I know
Hmm.
that people don't want to pay safeties, but this is still a guy 2 years removed from having what, 7 interceptions?
Yeah,
So
and prior to this, I think prior to last year, he had given up like 10 interceptions to just one touchdown. I know that last year wasn't great, but it wasn't abysmal either, and you still saw flashes. And given the situation he was in, again, I just think that I think this is a great buy low pick. And maybe this is similar to we remember they won a Super Bowl when they partially because they signed Alshon Jeffrey on that 1 year prove it deal. And well, I don't think they're going to win a Super Bowl this year. They also then were able to give Jeffrey a long term deal. Maybe Harris likes the system. He plays well. You can give him a deal.
yeah, I mean, Harris was pretty good last year, playing with like Division III cornerbacks. So
Hmm.
I think it's a steal for them, even if it's just for the season long rental. It'll be interesting to see what they do going forward. I don't think it's going to be a great team, like you said, but it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I agree. We'll go to the New York Football Giants. The big move they made was obviously the Kenny Galladay 4 year, 72 million. Get Mike Glennon, who can be a backup. Afidi and Dagabo, who I mentioned before, I think is underrated. Kyle Rudolph taking a flyer on John Ross. So they're adding a lot of these sort of guys that I feel like maybe are a bit underrated, maybe could do a little bit better than people realize. Also getting the Leonard Williams back. They lose your guy Dalvin Tomlinson along with Kevin Zeitler, but I still think this is a win. I think they gained more than they lost.
I think it's a win too. I liked all the moves they made overall. It didn't seem like Tomlinson was coming back anyways, so I
Hmm.
get it. I thought Leonard Williams bringing him back and getting him, not just bringing him back, but getting the long-term deal, I thought was a
Yeah.
really good move. And
Hmm.
bringing in Galladay makes a lot of sense. I think it creates a nice thing with him and Slayton. They have a lot of options now for Daniel. There's no more excuses for Daniel Jones, right? I mean, he has skill position players around him. I think the one knock you have on the Giants this offseason is this offensive line somehow got worse, right? I mean, that's
Hmm.
the one knock you had, is that it did get worse losing Zietler, but they're going to have to draft that and address it a lot. So maybe with an offensive line, you see what you can get out of Daniel Jones and see what kind of player he can be.
Yeah, that's what I was going to kind of say. Like, well, there still is that excuse of the line. Hopefully, I still have faith in Andrew Thomas. Hopefully, he can have a good second season. But that is a bit of a concern. This is a team that had playoff aspirations last year, despite their 6-10 record. They were, if the Washington football team lost week 17, they would have been in the playoffs. So it's again weird situation, but I do think that they're a team that feels like they can take the next jump, but they had to get better on offense, which is part of why getting Galladay was just such a huge move because they really needed that number one receiver.
So is Ryan Fitzpatrick the second best quarterback in this division, going back to Washington?
Ooh, so let's see. We got obviously Dak is number one. I would say yes. I would say yeah. I mean, I like some of what I saw with Jalen Hurts. I didn't like some of what he's kind of a wild card. But you got the known wild card in Ryan Fitzpatrick. So like, he certainly has the higher heights out of anyone except for Dak.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting. Yeah, I still feel like this Giants team still feels like 2 years away, right?
Yeah, as in like not next year, but the year after. I feel like this is still probably not a 2021. If they do make the playoffs, it'll probably be due to like a weak division, maybe a 7-9 record, and then but they don't seem like a real contenders this year as of right now.
I agree. So I mean, it
Hmm.
makes a lot of sense, but yeah, we'll see what happens with them going forward.
Yeah. All right. And now, final team on the list, the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas, obviously, the big thing they did was just keep Dak Prescott, which is big. They lose their backup in Andy Dalton, lose a couple of other pieces. Again, not a huge thing they're doing after the Dak Prescott. That's kind of just their one big deal. Do get Keanu Neal for a 1 year, $5 million deal, which again, crazy that like you wouldn't give Anthony Harris like 7 million, but I still think this is again, it can't look that way. Maybe Harris wanted to play in Philadelphia. We don't know. So I would say they're a win, largely just with keeping Dak.
I would say so too. And I thought, they did address the secondary. I don't know how much better it's going to be, but they were able to kind of address it. I would have liked Harris more on this team, like you said, But who knows with all the details? Maybe, the GM for them, the Eagles was doing the Asian a favor. You don't know how all that kind of stuff works really behind the scenes. So it would have been interesting to see. But yeah, I mean, I do have it as a slight win for the Cowboys. I think they are a better team and they're going to improve next season.
Yeah, so I had every team in the NFC East being winners in this as well. So one division had all losses. That was the NFC North, and now the NFC East, all winners. NFC East, they do nothing but win.
The best division in football.
Yes, exactly. All right, so that's all 32 teams. That's our show. Kyle, do you have any thoughts on a fun free agency weekend or week?
I was just happy the Patriots made move. We're back, baby. We're all about
Yeah.
it.
So how hyped are you on the Patriots? Scale of 1 to 10.
I'll put it like a 6 right now.
Okay.
I think that they're better than they were last season. Like I said, I think the spots that they were really bad at, I thought they improved greatly. Judging that front seven and the skill positions, the Gilmore thing remains to be an interesting part. And, Gilmore and J.C. Jackson, really, whether they give him a long-term deal. And then the last part will be the quarterback. So I think that's the last 3 moves for the Patriots, and it'll be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah, no, I agree. All right, so that's our show. Kyle, let them know where they can find you before we head out.
Yeah, follow us at Twitter. That's at Jackson Kruger on Twitter. That's at by Kyle Grondin on Twitter for me, at BYKYLEGRONDIN. And follow us on our Twitter page at On the Sideline JK. That's at On the Sideline JK. Show updates will be on there, and snide comments from me will be on there. If I make fun of your team, I'm sorry. But
you're not really sorry.
That's what I do. So.
Yeah. All right. And of course, as always, we appreciate you guys for watching. We've got a lot more fun off-season stuff coming up, I'm sure. So make sure you stay tuned. And until next time, have a good one.
Peace.